Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I, too, would like to welcome you to this opening ceremony of what I hope will be a pretty successful conference as we try to discuss the life and times and the work of Leonard Tim Hector in the context of Caribbean politics and economic development. As protocol already been observed by Mr. Ben, our host here at the University of the West Indies Open Campus, Antigua and Barbuda, I would proceed with my presentation, which I would entitle Leonard Tim Hector, Egalitarian and Visionary. It seems like only yesterday, but 10 years have passed since our brother and comrade had left us. Little over a month ago, Tim would have been observing his 70th birthday. This conference, organized in his honor, is a most fitting tribute, and special commendation should be given to Dr. Paget Henry of the Antigua and Barbuda Studies Association as the driving force behind this event, along with the other sponsors, University of the West Indies Open Campus, Antigua and Barbuda, and the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, the OWTU. To be born in 1942 and to grow up in a small colonial territory in that period in the Caribbean meant a particular exposure to world-impacting developments. The Second World War and what it meant for the islands and beyond, the rise of the trade union movement and the anti-colonial struggles throughout the region, from Guyana and Trinidad in the south to Jamaica in the north, giving impetus to the Federation and the independence movement. The Cuban Revolution reverberated throughout the Americas and beyond and had its impact. In the cauldron of political activity and discussion at the national and domestic level, which Tim Hector himself makes mention of in his Fan de Flame, he was coming face to face with the world of ideas and global politics, a prerequisite so vital, as he himself pointed out, in developing a perspective. Growing up in such a dynamic and vibrant environment, Hector yearned for greater information and knowledge, and with that, he read voraciously. He would excel at school, later becoming one of the youngest and inspirational teachers at his alma mater, the Antigua Grammar School. Not long after, he would have traveled to Canada to study. And what an experience that would be, living in an industrialized society in the throes of social and political upheavals taking place across North America, with the Vietnam War, the anti-war movement rage, making university campuses and cities in general a hotbed of social and political activity. At the same time, the Black Power and Civil Rights movement marched on inexorably. In the Maritimes, in Montreal, in Toronto, major conferences with noted scholars and political figures such as C.L.R. James, Walter Rodney, Alfie Roberts, and Kwame Ture would have taken place. Tim would be at the center of these activities, organizing, studying, and learning, particularly at the feet of his mentor, C.L.R. James. Postgraduate studies would begin at McGill University, but events at home in Antigua would beckon. And so Tim would make perhaps one of the most crucial decisions of his life. He decided to abandon his studies, to return home, and as the great chronicler and Latin American liberator Jose Marti stated in one of his poems, when he, Marti, expressed his desire to affiliate himself with the wretched of the earth, Tim also concluded, with the needy of the earth do I want my lot to cast. From that day in 1967, when Tim returned home, to his death 10 years ago in 2002, the struggle was his life. As teacher, as writer, as cricket and sports administrator, as political activist, he fought relentlessly to bring about a new order, and consequently, that new person capable of a variety of interests and ready to respond to a variety of social functions. This, he said, is the object and subject of our present struggle. Tim was an exceptional thinker and an intellect fertile in ideas. For Tim, ideas were weapons to be used in the fight for a better world. Listen to him in his Fan the Flame article, The Crisis in Education, January 1978, and I quote, "The world in which we live has fallen into greatest inhumanity. The concentration of capital means that mankind now threatens mankind with the destructive total and complete. With destruction total and complete. In education, that has meant reducing individuals to the inhumanity of narrow specializations." Sounds familiar? That was written 35 years ago. But he goes on further to say that very serious article, that same very serious article, that one's education has not begun if one does not develop a world view and a way of apprehending the world. And what does he say is the gravamen of the problem? He writes this, I quote, "Colonialism has done its very worst in preventing our people from penetrating beneath the surface into the core of the world historical event, the causes of such events and the effect upon us." End of quote. Consequently, he says, our politics, quote, "has been a series of shifts, one step forward and two steps backward. The more our professional leaders appear to oppose colonialism, the more they reaffirm it. This is our present dilemma, and therefore the dilemma of education. We are not too familiar with the idea here expressed. A clear case in point is the issue of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Let's stay with the Privy Council. Let's keep the Queen as head of state. To become a republic would mean a banana republic. But to address this crisis in education, which confronts us to this very day, Tim points out, it is the purpose and therefore the content of education that needs to be changed, not just the teacher training and the school buildings and other facilities. Otherwise, we will always remain dependent and backward, even fly-blown. He could not be clearer or more forceful. a close friend of Tim and ACLM, once publicly stated that the ambivalence and sometimes hostility displayed towards Tim and ACLM had to do with the mirror he held up to the population. Truth be told, we do not want to see our what. Tim, however, was not just about ideas. More than ever, he knew the need to combine theory and practice. So ACLM would build institutions with a view towards transforming society. To name just two, the Antigua Caribbean Training Institute and the West Antigua Cooperative Farm were developed. Such institutions would help to demonstrate what was possible and to point the way to a new alternative. With the obvious crisis of the education system, designed, as he forcibly points out, to make us dependent and more consumers, Tim and ACLM set about in every conceivable way to inform, educate, and agitate for meaningful change. Throughout the length and breadth of Antigua and Barbuda, and by way of films, meetings, articles, cultural programs, the history of the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid struggles was told and is significant and relevant to us as a people. In the defining document, The Caribbean Yesterday, Today and Tomorrow, as Paul Buell states in his book, Tim Hector, A Caribbean Radical Story. Hector drove home the historical lesson with a Jamesian look at slave uprising in Antigua and the region. If Jamaica blacks sought to overthrow all property relations in 1841, it was a quest to form a new society. So it was in his writings about King Court, demonstrating the level of organization and culture in attempting to overthrow a most oppressive system and to make themselves masters. We know that we are nourished by the past, but we know the past also needs us, and that unless we can create an original role for ourselves in the present, we will destroy our connections with the past. That was Wilson Harris, a foremost Caribbean scholar, writer, and thinker. Tim and ACLM made every effort to give real meaning to this profound statement. The need to build bridges at the same time, creating an original role for ourselves in the present, whilst always recognizing the tremendous role of those who came before. For decades, Tim and ACLM worked assiduously at developing a body of ideas as a result of study, as a result of constant discussions of local, regional, and international affairs, asking difficult questions about the organization of society, as a result of listening and engaging with the vital social forces in society. But the exercise was not about producing dogma. Instead, it will help to provide the tools of analysis. Let us refer to the source again, a fan de flame entitled Socialism, To Be or Not to Be. What is socialism? This was of April 1985. This is what Tim says on the subject. Socialism is not nationalization. Socialism is not a vanguard party in power. Socialism is the independent, creative spirit of the mass of population, given the room and opportunity to create new institutions at work for the reorganization of production in the interest of the majority of the toilers, and so creating popular democratic organs of self-management in society and therefore a new culture. An examination of ACLM and its activities with Tim as leader over some 3 decades would show tremendous effort to build institutions in communities throughout Antigua of an economic, cultural, educational, and political nature. It was an attempt to create outside of state power the beginnings of a new order within the old. That we made mistakes is without doubt, but oftentimes too, these efforts to bring about genuine transformation in society were met with sabotage at various levels. And to quote Brother Adlai Carrot in the preface to The World and Us, a book which was published by Tim Hector, by ACLM, that Tim Hector did, a compilation of some articles of the Fan de Flame over the years. And I quote, "As he, Tim, translated theory into practice and action, he, along with his colleagues in ACLM, felt the might of all-powerful state. He was persecuted and prosecuted, and his life was threatened. But never once did he retreat from his noble and courageous mission." This evening, it is an honor for the Leonard Tim Hector Memorial Committee and ACLM to be part of this very important conversation. Let me take this opportunity to welcome you all, and in particular, fellow travelers who have come from near and far to participate and to allow for ideas to contend at this very crucial juncture of our history. I am confident that the proceedings will be productive, and at its end, we will all be the better for it. And it would have invigorated us all to carry on the struggle for a more just and humane society. As Paul Buell said, Leonard Tim Hector offers us a voice and a template. He also offers us a life in search of freedom, at once political and artistic, egalitarian and multiracial. He is a surviving beacon for the cause that many millions died seeking in the 19th and 20th century, a cause repeatedly betrayed but never entirely lost. The struggle continues. Thank you very much.